I made Shadow the Hedgehog in Baldur's Gate 3.
We have a new look for a new shadow.
Can you see all of me? Walk into my mystery. Step inside and hold on for dear life.
In this video, I'm going to show you how I did it, why I did it, and what I learned from it. And you might be thinking to yourself, why is he holding a pillow with Keanu Reeves' face on it? Ironically, I've had this pillow for a long time. It just worked out perfectly that I could actually use it for a video. There we go. Keanu Reeves is still in the video. Why? First of all, why shouldn't even really be a question in this scenario. I mean, why wouldn't you? Basically, I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 since early access, and I played a lot of characters when it was in early access. So when it finally fully released, I started streaming it. That was a while ago. I tried a few different characters, but I wasn't really vibing with any of them. And so without knowing Sonic 3 was coming with Shadow in it, I thought to myself, what would make this playthrough more interesting? And that's when I decided I'm gonna make Shadow the Hedgehog. And here's how I did it. We'll start with his appearance, which, if I do say so myself, is pretty good. When you think about it, it's actually astoundingly good considering there's no hedgehog race in Baldur's Gate 3. Fun fact for everyone watching, there actually is a hedgehog race in D&D 5th edition. They're called the Arena, if I'm pronouncing that right, and they look sick. I ended up going with a wood elf because they have more movement speed, which is lore accurate, of course. And the elves in Baldur's Gate are pretty highly customizable, which I really needed to get the look just right. I tried a couple times to do it with less humanoid looking races, but they just did not have enough options. So with the wood elf, I changed the skin tone, I did some face paint, and I think I got to a pretty decent replica of Shadow. Then I gave him long hair with black and red streaks to represent Shadow's quills. And really beyond that, there wasn't much more I needed to do, but if I could go back and change it a little, which I definitely could have done at any point in my playthrough, I would have made him shorter. And I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. So he could have been shorter. And thus, my dear son, Shadow the Wood Elf, was born. Let's talk about the build. That's a dangerous game to play. No more of that, sir. Build-wise, I went with the Monk, which gave me more movement speed and a great system for melee-focused combat. And you're probably thinking, melee-focused combat? Shadow has a gun. Look, man, Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have pump action AKs. It doesn't have pistols. It's got spells and bows. And I just felt like melee was a better choice. That being said, with the melee focus, I went with the Way of the Hand subclass for my monk. And then I focused the majority of my gear around movement speed and melee attacks. This made for a really fun form of combat where I was rushing an enemy, beating the shit out of them, rushing to another enemy, beating the shit out of them, and repeating that cycle all in like one turn. I mean, there were times I could get like 3 kills in a turn and I still had movement speed left. I also inadvertently ended up with some like more Shadow-esque effects because I went with Dark Urge and I got a piece of gear that every time I killed someone I turned invisible. And if you don't know, Shadow the Hedgehog will like teleport to his enemies to hit them at times. And if you think about it, that's kind of what I was doing because all the enemy saw was bro dashes up at the speed of light, punches a guy till he's dead, turns invisible, pops up next to another guy, does the same thing. Pretty freaking cool, bro. Yeah, really, this just led to my playthrough really feeling like Shadow, at least combat-wise. But if we go further than combat, which of course I did, I took every liberty I could, we get to the story. As I mentioned just a second ago, I went with the Dark Urge version of the Baldur's Gate 3 story. It's a backstory option that changes like the trajectory of the main storyline. And the basic concept of Dark Urge is like you have an urge to be evil, so you're fighting this evil urge throughout the game. And that leads to a lot of interesting decisions like choosing whether or not to kill party members, choosing to side with the god of murder or not, choosing whether to dominate the world or not. And overall, if you think about it, and if you've played the magnificent masterpiece of a game that is Shadow the Hedgehog for GameCube, then you can already see the parallels happening between the moral choices in my playthrough. And just to be clear, let me be clear. Ultimately, I didn't end up going full evil because the writing in this game is just so fucking good, and it was my first full playthrough. I felt way too attached to a lot of characters and things that had happened. However, in my opinion, that goes even more with Shadow the Hedgehog because when I played that game, I also did not go full evil. I love the term full evil. Bro just went full evil. Bro, you just went full evil, bro.
You're just as evil as me.
Another less solid but pretty funny similarity is while doing the main story of the game, regardless of the Dark Urge, there's mind flayers. And that's not a spoiler or anything, there's mind flayers throughout the whole game. But it cracked me up when thinking about playing Shadow because mind flayers are like aliens with tentacles, which if you've played Shadow the Hedgehog, the video game, that's pretty similar to one of the main factions in that game. I'm just saying, man, it worked so well. All that being said, it was fucking sick, dude. I felt like I got all the greatness of Baldur's Gate 3 while also getting the blissful nostalgia of Shadow the Hedgehog. And before we get to the conclusion of this video, I just want to take this time to say, if you're a fan of Baldur's Gate 3 and you haven't done a Dark Urge playthrough, fucking do a Dark Urge playthrough. It's so good. If you haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, it's not necessarily for everyone, but it is a masterpiece of a game. You should go play it.
And the game of the year is Baldur's Gate 3.
So there you have it, Shadow the Hedgehog in Baldur's Gate 3. I want to take the end of this video to say a couple things. The first is, if my voice sounds fucked up, it's because I'm kind of sick. Fucking sick, dude! But the second and more important thing is, finishing Baldur's Gate 3 was genuinely such an interesting part of my life. It's a game I played in early access. It took me over a year to finish because I barely had time to play it. And during that time, it won Game of the Year, which was very much well deserved. Baldur's Gate 3 reminded me how beautiful video games can be when they're made purely to be enjoyed. It's not a competitive game. It's not a live service game full of microtransactions. And it's not a bland corporate mass appeal game. It is a solo or group experience that engrosses you, entertains you, pulls at your heartstrings, and genuinely leaves you feeling satisfied when you finish it. It's one of those pieces of media that will stick with me for a very long time. With how long it took me to finish it, all the things going on in my life while I was playing it, everyone who tuned into the streams, and the amazing heartfelt story that it tells, it has literally been my rock for the last year. I just want to say thank you to the team that made this masterpiece. Thank you to anyone who watched me play it. And I'll leave you with one of the most beautiful quotes, in my opinion, from the game, from Karlach, a character I didn't get much time with, but that has a really cool story. And before I let you go, stay sick, stay freaky, and don't toast or bath. Bye.
I thought it best to just keep my distance. But loneliness that deep gets into the marrow. Now that I'm here, among friends, I can feel it burning out of me. Little by little, step by step.